Today I wanted to talk about Title Fight's Flood of 72, and in particular there are kind of three takeaways from this song that I think are worth discussing, and these are valuable musical insights that I think you can apply to your own music. And so we'll start off with the main riff. We've got this little... So the first three notes are based around this G major add 9 kind of thing. So we've got the G, we've got the major 7, then we got the 9 up here. What we got here is a kind of add 9 chord where we're omitting the third. So what we have is a very kind of ambiguous sound, and that adds a bit of tension. It's uncertain in a way. It doesn't fully resolve into anything, and that leaves us with a feeling of unease. It then transitions to this little hammer-on part. That's interesting as well because, of course, in the actual verse, the second main chord is kind of this A6 thing. Again, kind of a similar vibe to that G major add 9. It's just kind of uncertain, it doesn't resolve, there's no third in there, so it kind of leaves you with a sense of unease. But interestingly, he's doing a hammer-on here between the F sharp and the D, so it's like a... and then using the kind of E as a walk in back to that G major 7 add 9. So in that little sequence, all the notes actually kind of imply just a regular old D major. And that, of course, is going to come up later in the chorus where we get the... So I thought that was kind of a fun way to both tie in probably the second main chord in the verse in that A6, but also kind of imply or foreshadow that we're going to end up at that D later on in the chorus. And what's nice about some of the decisions made here is we're just playing the riff the once, and we're letting it settle before the chaos of the band kind of sweeps in and gives us this really high energy, powerful verse. So although we're kind of dragged into the song on this softer note, this quieter note, this slower note, we're immediately slapped in the face with the bass that comes running in like... and then just right behind them, the whole band with the... blistering pace, complete 180 from what we were introduced to. And again, it's little juxtapositions like that that I think really keep listeners engaged. So we're kind of misleading them with that slower intro and then blasting the fuck out of them with the verse. That's maybe a kind of dynamic you might want to play with in some of your own songs, and it's something that Title Fight do quite a lot. Now, not only did I want to highlight the chord voicings present in that riff, but I also think the riff itself serves as a major motif across the entire song. When we get to the chorus, we start off with the... So again, it's kind of teasing the main riff again with playing the same first chord, right? But then instead of going just straight up to the A, it's playing the little... So it sort of implies that main riff again. So the kind of creative point I want to make here is we ought to find ways to turn riffs into a recurring motif. So Title Fight here in this song play the riff just once at the beginning. They kind of synthesize that with elements of the verse for the chorus, and then when we transition to the end of the song, we get the riff kind of recontextualized. So the first time we hear the riff, it's kind of a counter to the abrasiveness of the verse. It's a really soft and slow way to ease you into the song before blasting you with that fast riff in the verse. The second time we hear it, it's kind of then synthesized with some of those brash elements in the verse to give us that chorus. But the third time we hear it, we get a full version of the riff that repeats. And this time it's recontextualized. It's a little more chill, but the full band's there to support it, repeating the motif. And of course, here we get a much nicer, extended version that goes something like... And then, of course, there's a second guitar that goes over it, a kind of counter melody or of the sorts that goes... And this is sort of an instance of the emo triangle for any of you Sugar Pill fans out there. Of course, we've got Ned on the bass hammering away just the basic rhythm, but then we have Jamie playing that first riff, and then Shane doing the overdub, or the counter melody. So again, one riff in three different ways, a kind of reoccurring motif, used to different effects. That's something we ought to be using in our own songs. Make that riff and find different ways to splash into your song. It doesn't have to be just a riff repeating over and over again. It can be a little piece of it that's hinted at in a progression, or it can be a developed version of it later on in a different context. Little things like that go a long way. And the last thing I wanted to discuss is the way they integrate runs into their chord progressions. Now, I come from a bass playing background, and more specifically, I come from a pop punk background. So think of your Green Days, you know, your Mike Dirnt's or your Blink-182s and Mark Hoppus's. And one feature that always stood out to me about their bass playing was their use of runs. Now, I know the stereotype is that pop punk bassists are just hammering away at root notes, but there is a subtlety that can really make or break a good pop punk bass line, and that's the way the bassist moves between root notes. Now, Mark Hoppus is a lot simpler. He'll kind of just walk up the scale between two root notes. Mike Dirnt, he'll do some crazy runs around those root notes. And we kind of have some of that movement happening on the rhythm guitars here. And it comes up in two ways. One is kind of in chord runs, which I'll talk about in a second, but there's also kind of subtle variation in the actual chord voicings that create a sense of movement. So for instance, in the verse, Jamie is doing, again, the major 7 add 9 for most of it, right? But on the second time the phrase repeats, he's actually lifting up his pinky off of the F sharp on the D and just kind of letting it play as an open D, which ends up giving us a kind of G suspended, I think a G sus2 kind of sound. So you get like a... Can you hear that? It's very subtle, but it's just noticeable. And similarly, and this one's my personal kind of favorite thing that they're doing, with the A6, they're actually switching between an A6 and an A5. So power chord, right? So it's the... That is very pronounced to me. That adds a whole other sense of like harmonic quality as well as like rhythmic movement to the song that I think if you just played the A6, it'd be good, but it wouldn't be fucking great. And that's fucking great. But the more important point I wanted to talk about was their use of chord runs. And it's going back to my discussion about bass players, because bassists will always do this. They don't solo so much as they integrate little runs into their bass lines just to give you something else extra to latch onto. And normally that's hidden behind guitars just playing, you know, the basic chords over and over again, as is the case often in Blink-182. But here, Title Fight integrate those runs into the actual progression. So in the verse, so the first one is, I think, like a B minor 7, just into an F sharp 5, which again just adds a little more movement to the song. It's a little more interesting to listen to, and I really like the F sharp 5 here because it's such a simple chord. It's a root and it's a fifth. It's definite, it's certain, and then you're going back to the uncertainty of the G major 7 add 9. I mean, just the... What a move. And then we get the other variation where it's just like it's like an E F sharp back into it, right? So it's... And that's fucking sweet. Again, the choice to use the 5 chords there, the power chords, is really smart because it's a lot of notes coming at you fast, right? We got like the little, the palm muted triplets. And with all these notes coming at you so fast, I think the choice to choose something more harmonically simple really works. It's really mechanical, it's precise, and it really just focuses on the raw energy in the moment. But that in itself is another point worth discussing. I mean, switch up your rhythms, folks. How many of us came from Blink-182? Personally, still one of my favorite bands, but you get the... Cool, nice little poppy strum pattern. But with Title Fight, you're kind of... There's so much variation in the rhythm there. And there's a whole video to be made on switching up your rhythms, but that's not this video. And the Banana Man's final point kind of just goes back to chord runs. In the chorus, I wanted to talk about that section. It's just power chords on Jamie's main guitar. And as I mentioned in another video, we're kind of getting that Weezer chord, the inverted power chord, as I believe they're called. But what's actually happening in the song is way cooler than what is being shown on a single guitar. Because what we're getting is Jamie playing that kind of D5 Weezer chord twice, but Shane's going from just a regular D5 with the high octave, which isn't in Jamie's guitar, might I add. And then he's switching to like a D major 7. So he's going... And what really ties this together is Ned on the bass. He does a D, but he doesn't play twice. He plays D, C sharp. So he's kind of mirroring the movement happening on Shane's high G string. So of course, when you're doing the D5 to the D major 7, what's happening is you're taking the octave and you're bringing it down a half step. But that's just a D and a C sharp. So the bass is mirroring that. And it's just more harmonically interesting. I don't know what to say. Like, your bass does not have to mirror just the root notes of the chords. There are other notes happening in these chords that you can play around with. And I think that was a really beautiful example of how you can do that to create a really interesting moment in a song. My name is Doofy, and you like this kind of analysis, let me know, because I be yapping, I be listening to Title Fight, but I be listening to other songs and other artists and other albums, and I do hope to extend these very rudimentary yap sesh analyses to other bands. Thank you for watching.